People ask me how this came about. Well, I used to, as you saw, I used to take part a lot in exhibits at what was then the Pope John Paul Cultural Center. It's now the St. John Paul Shrine. And my painting of John Paul hung there for several years. And they would have exhibits and they would invite me to take part. And I came to be sort of family. And at one point they were going to have an exhibit for Black History Month, and the curator invited me to take part, and he said, oh, just bring one of your Hispanic paintings. I mean, I guess he was trying to make it easy for me. And I said, no, that would be insulting. I'll do an African American painting. It happened that on that particular trip to Washington, I also went to the portrait gallery, and I happened to see a photograph of Sojourner Truth. And I found the face so compelling. Here was this obvious person who was not very educated, but had such wisdom in her face. And it was just, I found it fascinating. And I said, I've got the painting I'm gonna do. So I went home and went on Google Images, and the result is the painting that you see here. Everybody loved it at the John Paul Shrine, and the curator started saying to me, you know, you should do a whole collection. And my reaction was, are you absolutely crazy? Do you realize how long that's going to take? And I don't know if people will like it or not. Well, not long after that, I saw some photographs of Frederick Douglass, and I had this same reaction. What an extraordinary, compelling face. You know, I want to do him. So I did it, and I took it down to Washington, and they loved it, and they were saying the same thing. You should do a collection. Well, at some point, my no way became, I guess I'll do it. And it was as time consuming as I knew it would be. It took me 1.5 years of my so-called spare time. But I'm very glad I did it. It was a journey of discovery where I feel like I met some very interesting people and got to know them, and I'm very glad that I did it. People ask me how I choose the people I painted. I guess that's a multi-part answer. You start, well, in the first place, on day one, I didn't have to make a list and say, these are all the people I'm going to do. It developed gradually. You start out with some people that have to be included, you know, the most important people. And then you go beyond those where you have some choice. And my feeling was I wanted to do sort of a cross-section, and that's why some people are included that maybe wouldn't have been otherwise. Now, another decision I made early on, I felt that just doing random important Black people was a little bit amorphous, and it would be better if it actually had a theme. And I liked the idea of the theme being the people who led up to Martin Luther King. Part of it is because I love history, and these are people who are being forgotten. That, by the way, is why I didn't paint Muhammad Ali. I painted Joe Louis, and now you understand. Now you understand, right? Right, there's no one after him in the collection. These are people who are being forgotten, and that's such a pity. And my son was telling me that Chris Rock has a comedy routine where, you know, no matter what you say, who did this and such, they say Martin Luther King. And then who was it that wouldn't give her seat up on the bus? Oh, well, Martina Luther King. And even among young Blacks, it's being forgotten. And that was my own little modest contribution to that. It's a wonderful thing that now we have computers and the internet, because I couldn't have done it without it. You will hear me refer often to Google Images. That Google Images these days is my best friend, closely followed by YouTube. You will hear me cite how many times I say, okay, I got stuck and I went to Google Images. Without it, I really couldn't have done it. Through that, there were so many things I found to read. I found the organizations that were devoted to these people. It was just 20 years ago, I couldn't have done this. It's just as simple as that. One of the things that's important to me is to read as much as I can about a given person. And these days, for many of them, there are also videos you could watch, because I like to get to the point that I feel like I know them, that there's somebody I have been around. I like to get what I'll call a sculptor's feel for the head, not just what it is in a photograph, but a three-dimensional thing, the way a sculptor needs to understand it. And of course, what they were like. So I would read about them, watch movies if I could, take a look at all the photographs till I felt I understood their personality and I understood their face. And at that point, I would say, okay, how do I want to paint them? So I'd go to Google Images and I would start looking at photographs. A few were easy. You just look at something and you say, that's it, that's all I need. Some were quite hard. And some really are a jigsaw puzzle. One of the things that I say in the video that we didn't get to, I make the point of saying there are actually people I've never painted because I've never found a photograph that I feel really conveys what I want to convey. And for instance, the one of John Paul, which some of you have seen, it was several years from the time I wanted to paint him before I actually found a photograph that conveyed what I wanted. And even then, I made changes in the photograph. Sometimes with somebody, I have an idea in mind, this is what I want to project, and if I can't find the means to project it, then I'll just do something else. Now, one of the things I like to do with groups is bring them in a little bit into my artistic process. And this is not really a history talk, this is an art talk, how this developed artistically. It's easy to see these paintings and just assume that, you know, one day they were just there. And to the extent somebody had to paint them, well, she just copied something down to the last detail, and it was effortless. If you're being ambitious and you're trying to do what you see that I do, it's not nearly that simple. And I want to show you by going into detail about two of the paintings, one which was one of the easy ones and one which was the hardest one. And I will tip you off in advance that you're going to get with the second one a little bit of an art lesson having to do especially with linear perspective. Okay, let's hope this is working. You have there W.E.B. Du Bois, and I'm not mispronouncing it out of ignorance, but because that was his preference. Instead of, it's the French name Dubois, but he pronounced it Du Bois, so I will follow his lead. This is the photograph I had of Du Bois, and you can see, well, no, I take that back, I don't have a print of it. But you'll see in a minute, or you saw in the book, the painting. And this seems very straightforward, right? Okay, except, actually there were some problems with it. This isn't very clear. This isn't very clear. this is overexposed and definitely not clear. I can't see the details of the book in the background. Now, you know, they would say, well, that's fine. Well, no, it's not fine because I can't paint what I can't see. So and keep in mind, this was one of the really easy ones. So I had to find a way to supply all these things. I didn't get this for Winston Churchill, I got it for his handkerchief. And do you know where I got this? Google Images. I told you, it's my best friend. Here's another one. Here's the French cuff. See, I have to get photographs showing these articles so I can see the details. Now take a look. Okay, here's another one. Now take a look at this one. The one in the photograph really only comes to about here, and I want it to be more. Well, this brings us to one of the activities I am involved with often. No one who gets to know me is ever safe from being asked to pose for random anatomical fragments that I may desperately need at that particular moment. I've got photographs of all my friends, of all the handymen who've ever been through my house, my children in all kinds of poses anybody else would consider silly, but it's a real need. This was a friend of mine, and he very kindly agreed to pose so I could get a better sense of the hand and the hip. So, and this smiling man, I looked at, anybody else would have looked at the photograph and said, oh, what a silly look on his face, and gone on. I looked and I said, oh my God, that's the library that I need. Those are the books. So that is what I use for the books. You know, if people who are around me need to understand that I get very excited about things that they can't understand. And that's just how it is, because I'm looking at any given time, there are things that I know I'm going to need, and it's such a relief for me to come across by chance something that's actually going to take care of it for me. So that was the easy one. Okay. And that was the painting. Okay, now we get to the hard one. This is Marian Anderson. She was one of the great voices of the 20th century. And in the context of race relationships and relations, she is especially known for an incident that took place in the late 30s. She was supposed to sing in Washington in Constitution Hall, and the Daughters of the American Revolution, who owned the hall, said, no, she's black, she can't sing here. So it was canceled, and eventually the Daughters of the American Revolution apologized and invited her to sing there, in all fairness. Well, that was the time, that was when Franklin Roosevelt was president, and Eleanor Roosevelt heard about it, and she was very upset. And she said, well, I can't do anything about Constitution Hall, but you know what, there's a little venue that I can, where I can make the decisions, and you know what, I'll let you have it. So, now, well, this is skipping. This, for whatever reason, the venue she had was Constitution Hall. Now, Rebecca, is this the African American long one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the photograph I wanted to show you shows the whole mall with the it's got the Lincoln Memorial on one end and the Jefferson Memorial on the other. And the whole thing is just crowded with people, thousands of people there, and hundreds of thousands of people heard it over the radio. It was a very big deal at that moment. Now, so I asked myself, okay, if I'm going to paint this, how am I going to depict it? Well, if it's Marian Anderson at the Lincoln Memorial, well, you know what, I'm going to want to show Lincoln. Her painting or singing in front of the Lincoln statue. Well, I run into all kinds of problems there because the Lincoln statue is in there. And she's out here, and what there is just columns and steps. Well, how exciting are columns and steps? Okay, so that wasn't going to work. No, there's some things missing here. So the question was, I knew that I was, normally I'm a stickler for history and accuracy, but in this case, I knew I was going to have to take some liberty so I could show Marian Anderson with the statue of Lincoln behind her. But that was going to come later. First, I was going to focus on the figure of Marian Anderson. Now here's another view, and you'll see later that I actually used these. Now I got this because this was not from the same day, but this was the outfit that she wore. And so this was very useful to me for purposes of understanding the outfit. So, I remember I said that I get people who pose in various ways. Well, this is my patient daughter, and one day I said to her, okay, I want to take pictures of you in different positions where your hands are like a singer's would be, so that I can find, I knew, I had gone through the photographs, and I knew there wasn't any that was ready to go, where the head and the body were in the position I wanted. That there were none. I was going to have to create it myself. So I actually shot her, took about 20 pictures of her, and I got a code out so I'd have that. She was a very good sport. Okay.
That's the one right there.
Yeah, that's it. And eventually, this is the one that I decided to use. And this was the head I decided on. And you're going to see now, with this body, okay. Isn't Photoshop wonderful?
Wow.
So, okay, so I've got a head and a body together that are what I want. What's
Going back.
it's going back? Okay, now I'm really confused. This is the image that you can see here. This is where the music was this was the pianist, I guess she would be here, and the whole wall was full of people.
That's amazing.
Okay, so now we're ready to decide what we're going to do about Lincoln. Now, something like this would have been really nice, except he was too much in the shadows, and I couldn't do her like that, so that wouldn't work. But I got several photographs of, again, in Google Images. Okay, now here, I told you we're going to get a little bit of a lesson in linear perspective. I don't want to go into it too much, but the point I want to make is that the angle at which you see things depends on where they are in relation to the horizon. The horizon being normally the eye level of an adult. So you can see here, if it's below the horizon, you basically see the top. If it's here, you don't see the top or the bottom. If it's higher up, you basically see the bottom. Now that's important because like this is too high. This angle is too high. Now, I need to explain something else again. I had to make some decisions. One had to do with whether things, there was Lincoln and there was Marian Anderson, whether they were straight on or whether they were at an angle. Basically, if something is straight on, it's a lot more static. If things are at an angle, that's more dynamic. So that was the first choice I needed to make. And I decided that I didn't want either Marian Anderson or Lincoln just looking dead on out of there. Now, the second thing I needed to decide was how high Lincoln was going to be in relation to Marian Anderson. And this was a very big issue because the real Lincoln statue is enormous, exactly. I mean, people don't even come up to the top of the base. It's huge. Even if I made it even remotely in scale, I would have painted something that wouldn't even fit into a truck. Alternately, I could have made it small, but then Marian Anderson would have been like a little ant at the bottom. So here's what I ended up doing. I ended up deciding on this one, which I liked the fact that it was to the side and she was on the side in the opposite direction, and that gave it sort of a Z, which I thought was more dynamic. Here you see the actual scale. But this is what I did. And this was in Photoshop, and Marian Anderson and Lincoln were on different layers. And I actually made Lincoln several different sizes so that I could see which of the sizes, given the considerations I've just explained, I thought would work. Because I couldn't make him so small that people would say, well, what's going on here? You know, that's way too small. So in the end, this was what I chose. And I always thought at some point somebody's going to call me out and they're going to say, oh, but the proportion's wrong. Lincoln's much bigger. For whatever reason, nobody has, ever.
And so you explained that entire thing, it would have dawned on me.
And you think that I'm finished with the complexities. No. Okay. What do we do here?
Yeah.
Okay, because the photograph I had was just to here. Okay, we can't have that be empty, right? So I got a photograph of the base so I could see exactly what the base looked like. And actually, I love exercises in linear perspective. If you take the time to learn it, it just solves so many problems for you. I just absolutely love it. So here, the reason I put this up is to just very briefly discuss the principle with you, which is, I already showed you one aspect of it. Another is that things that are on a side have what's called two vanishing points. This isn't an art lecture, so I won't go into it, just accept on faith, clarity. And you can take any angle and you can draw it to where it meets the horizon. And that's your vanishing point. And all the other lines on that side are going to go to the same, everything's going to go to the same vanishing point. So that's the vanishing point for this, and the vanishing point over here is going to be this. And you see the vanishing points drawn for the other two. So that's the principle that you use. And this is what I did. Can you see it?
I'm sure.
Okay, so now I knew I was this line that I did was gonna be my horizon. You saw in the photograph the placement of Marian Anderson in relation to the Lincoln statue. So her head was gonna come up to about here. Now, if you look at this, you're gonna say this is out of whack. Yes, it's totally out of whack because they're not in scale to each other. Actually, she only comes to about here. And you can see that this base would actually have come all the way down here. But actually, we're not seeing it. We're only seeing a fraction of this. And I just wanted to be able to correctly suggest the base. So at that point, I could paint in the base with accurate lines, which is very important. Do you think we're finished? Well, you know from what I'm saying, you know the answer is going to be no. Okay. There's something we still have to do. Who knows what it might be? Carol, you got the painting.
I'm looking at it. The background?
No, we've taken care of that.
The clothes.
No, we've done the clothes. No.
The placement of the microphones.
The microphones.
The placement of the microphones.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you can probably figure out why I left the mics for last, because they're very small. There's this tiny, thin cable. I can't be doing that with the clothes. It just doesn't make any sense. You do the area, paint the area, and when it's dry, then you paint in the mics. Now here, this is where the vanishing point, just so you can see, it was way down. Yeah, it was out here. So, okay, so I go back to the photographs that I have. These are the mics. Here's another view. And here, finally, here's the finished picture. And I did all the mics as, you know, with detail to replicate the original mics. Okay, I think that's the end. Okay. Okay, I'm finished with this, but I guess we can just leave it there. Again, I did this because these are people that are being forgotten. I love taking photographs that are just fading smudges of black or sepia and turning them into what looks like vibrant human beings. And I love doing that. Again, I like history, and I feel like I'm sort of extending my hand across the ages and bringing them to us so they can talk to us about what they did. So from that point of view, that was very fulfilling for me. Now, a parting thought about this. There was an article that I read saying Black History Month shouldn't just concentrate on people who were extraordinary. It should also talk about contemporary people who are normal but doing great things. And I thought, no, he's getting it wrong. These people were extraordinary in their achievements, above all because of the effort they put into it. Now, there were people who had a very special talent, like Marian Anderson's voice, Jackie Robinson's talent at baseball. But most of the people there didn't have something quite in that category. They were very talented, very intelligent people who, above all, just made a huge effort. And when you consider half the people I did began life as slaves, that is very, very impressive. And so a takeaway for all of us, leaving aside history and art, is that these people, if nothing else, should be an inspiration to us and to the college students that you teach, because they show what determination can achieve, and that's a lesson for everybody. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Does anyone have questions?
Wow. Well, I got a lesson today.
Did you create other collections?
Yeah, you know, I don't mean to do collections. It just works out that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I have a collection of religious paintings, like,
I did see that, yeah.
yeah.
You work on one painting at a time, or do you have multiple paintings going?
One or two at a time. Yeah.
And how long does it take to do a painting? You said a year and a half to do the entire collection.
Yeah.
I thought that was
Yes.
very fast.
Well, I don't take time off.
With everything that you have to do to find all of the pieces that fit together,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
You know,
I've never heard anybody do this kind of work before.
you know, illustrators do. There is a book by an illustrator, James Gurney, who is fabulous. And he showed photographs of doing exactly the same sort of thing that I did. And there was one where he had somebody in a long bathrobe and holding a broom in his hand, and that was going to be like a wizard holding, I don't know what. And I thought, oh my God, he does exactly what I do.
Wow.
Yeah, and you know, people say to me, oh, that's great you do art, it must be so relaxing.
Yeah.
Oh my Steve.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
We're sorry for all the technical.
Yeah.